Have you ever felt completely drained after spending time with someone? Not because anything dramatic happened, but just because something deep inside you felt off? Have you ever prayed harder, tried harder, loved harder, and still felt like a certain person in your life was pulling you further from God rather than closer to Him? Have you ever looked at a relationship, a friendship, a romance, maybe even a family connection, and felt this quiet, almost guilty thought? I think this person is costing me something I can't afford to lose. And have you ever wondered if God Himself was trying to tell you something, and you kept missing it because you were too afraid to listen? If any of that resonates with you, stay with me, because what you're about to hear is not comfortable. It is not easy, but it may be the most important message your spiritual life has needed in a very long time. Here is what most believers are never taught in church. God is not just in the business of adding to your life. He is actively, intentionally, and lovingly in the business of subtracting from it. And right now, in this exact season of your life, there is likely a person God has already marked for removal, not out of cruelty, not by accident, but because their continued presence in your life is costing you your peace, your purpose, and your proximity to Him. The problem is, most Christians fight this process. They spiritualize their attachment. They call it being loyal. They call it unconditional love. And they stay long past the moment God said go, and they wonder why they feel spiritually stuck. Now stay with me through every point today, because I need to warn you right now. The final point, the last one, is the one most believers are completely unprepared for. It may be the most dangerous truth in this entire message. Do not skip ahead. Do not click away. You need to hear all of it. The person who only appears when you're doing well. You know this person. When life is good, when you're winning, when there's something to celebrate, they are front and center. But the moment you're in a valley, the moment you need prayer, the moment the weight becomes real, they disappear. Proverbs 19:4 says, "Wealth brings many friends, but a poor man's friend deserts him." This is not just about money. It is about energy, status, and what you can offer. Some people are not in relationship with you. They are in relationship with what you provide. And God sees that, even when you refuse to. Here is your call to self-reflection. Think of one person in your life right now. Where were they the last time you were in pain? That answer tells you more than years of good memories ever could. The person who celebrates your stagnation. There is a type of person who is genuinely comfortable, even quietly pleased, when you are not growing. They laugh a little too hard when you talk about your dreams. They remind you of your past failures with a smile. They call it keeping it real, but what they are actually doing is keeping you small. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." Transformation requires an environment. And some people are allergic to your transformation because it forces them to confront their own stagnation. So instead of growing, they pull. Instead of building, they diminish. Here is your call to self-reflection. Who in your life gets uncomfortable when you talk about who God is calling you to become? Sit with that. The discomfort they feel about your growth is not your responsibility to manage. The person who makes you compromise your standards. This one is subtle. This one is dangerous. Because this person does not ask you to sin outright. They simply make it easier. One compromise at a time. One exception. One just this once. And slowly, quietly, your standards erode. And you don't even notice until you've drifted so far from God you can barely recognize yourself. 1 Corinthians 15:33 says it plainly. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. God did not design your character to be negotiable. He did not place convictions inside you so that the right person could talk you out of them. When someone consistently makes your walk with God harder, not through persecution, but through proximity, that is not coincidence. That is a warning. Here is your call to self-reflection. Are you the same person spiritually that you were before this relationship began? Or have you slowly lowered the bar to keep the peace, the person who keeps you anchored to your past? Some people in your life knew the old you, and whether they mean to or not, they need you to stay that person. They reference who you were. They define you by what you did. They bring up your failures as a way of reminding you and themselves that you are not allowed to change. Isaiah 43:30-18-19 says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." God is doing a new thing in your life. But some relationships are built entirely on the foundation of who you used to be, and you cannot step into your divine calling while someone is gripping your ankles and pulling you backward. Here is your call to self-reflection. Is there someone in your life who has never once acknowledged how far God has brought you? Who only sees you through the lens of your worst moments? That lens is a cage, and God may be calling you to walk out of it. The person who drains your spiritual energy after every interaction, you feel depleted, heavy, foggy, like something was taken from you. You cannot explain it theologically, but spiritually, you feel it deeply. Something about this connection costs you your peace. And peace, according to Scripture, is not a luxury, it is a compass. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts." The word rule in that verse means to umpire, to make the final call. Your peace is supposed to be your spiritual referee. And if every time you're around a certain person that referee is blowing the whistle, that is not anxiety, that is discernment. Here is your call to self-reflection. Pay attention to how your body and spirit feel after your next interaction with this person. That feeling is not random. God speaks through your peace and through the absence of it. The person God already told you about, and now we arrive at the point I warned you about. The most important one. The one that will sit with you long after this video ends. There is likely someone in your life right now that God has already spoken to you about. Not loudly, not with a billboard, but in that quiet 3 a.m. moment, in the middle of your prayer, in that still small voice that said, "This person is not for this season." And you heard it, you felt it, but you reasoned your way out of obedience. You said, "But we've been friends for years." You said, "But they need me." You said, "But what will people think?" And you stayed, and you are still there. And deep down, you already know. 1 Kings 19:12 describes God's voice not as thunder or fire, but as a still small voice. That voice is not dramatic. It does not repeat itself loudly. It whispers. And if you've been ignoring that whisper, this video is God's way of turning up the volume one final time. Here is your call to self-reflection. You already know who this is about. You knew before you clicked on this video. The question is no longer whether God is speaking. The question is whether you are finally ready to obey. God's removals are never punishments. They are promotions. Every person He lifts from your life is creating space for the right people, the right peace, and the right version of you to finally emerge. You do not have to end things with bitterness. You do not have to make an announcement. Sometimes obedience simply looks like releasing your grip, letting the distance grow without guilt, trusting that the God who orders your steps also orders your seasons, including who belongs in them and who does not. The most spiritual thing you can do right now is not to pray harder for a relationship God has already closed. It is to trust the one who loves you enough to protect you, even from your own attachments. If this message landed in your spirit today, if you feel that quiet confirmation that God has been trying to get your word on this, I want you to type the word "release" in the comments right now, not for me, for you, as a declaration that you are choosing obedience over comfort, purpose over familiarity, and God's plan over your fear. Type "release" and let the season begin.